There's no concrete path. You do this, and then you do this or whatever. The better you're going to end up being, it is directly proportionate to the amount of hard work and sacrifice you make. And if you're not willing to take the hard and difficult and long path, then you're not going to achieve, the upper tier of results.
Trevor, if these walls could speak, correct, here in your recording studios, there is culture and emotional music that has come from these walls and in this entire studio that has been amazing, that has shaped people's lives at such a high level. You've been kind of here from the beginning, from the early days.
Early days, yes. Beginning, no. Facility's founded in 1958.
Oh, interesting, that far.
Yeah, so it's 60 plus years, one of the oldest multi-room spaces on the planet. I've been here working full-time since 1983.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but before that, I was here since I was 5.
Since you were 5 years old, running around just...
stealing roaches out of ashtrays. Absolutely.
And how did that start? How did you get involved with here that young?
My father was a promotions guy for MCA Records, and he and my mother relocated from Seattle to Miami, and she was able to get a job answering the phones at the studio in 1969. One day she didn't have a babysitter, so she had to bring me to work, and I was asleep in the dub room next door, and there was a bunch of long-haired guys in the room on the other side of the wall, and that was the day Layla was tracked. So I've been around for a long time.
How exciting to witness that at such a young age. The impact of some of the artists that have been here and some of the stories that you've witnessed and what you've seen. And you've got degrees in business administration and telecommunications management. So
which qualifies me to deliver mail.
Well, I'm sure that has assisted you in the process of being able to manage this place at such a high level.
Yeah, as much as anything can, perhaps a degree in psychology would have been better served, but the concept's the same.
We have these people that watch these interviews and enjoy the fact that we have such a wide variety of people that we showcase to them. What is it like being here and working and being able to manage this level of a high level studio?
It's not just a job, it's an adventure.
For sure.
Every day's a brand new scenario of problems to solve, obstacles to overcome, people to make happy. So it's not like, this is what you do every day and you're shuffling papers or whatever. It's a crapshoot. Every day is different.
So there might be challenges, like you were saying, that someone had spilled something on the board.
Oh yeah, that was last night.
That was just last night. So all of a sudden now you've got to come in here, it's problem solving at its highest level.
Yeah, fortunately I have a great staff, and my chief tech is in there right now dealing with it, but hopefully we have a replacement part. But one of the things with a multi-room facility is, all we have to do is sell time, essentially. Yeah. So I've got one session that ends at 8, another one that begins at 9 or 10, and if something goes wrong, we need to jump on it to facilitate the next session coming in. Right. So right now on the other side of the wall, that's what people are doing. They're trying to scramble and replace a module in the console and have it set up in time to not compromise the integrity of the next session. Right, so it's one of the things I'm fond of saying is we're a 5-star hotel. We just happen to make records. So
which is really, when you think about it, that's really beautifully said. What you've witnessed going back to the scene many years ago to where it is now. Just tell me what it was like years ago.
Fun.
Interesting.
Which is not to say that it can't be fun now, but it's the music business. Yeah. Before it was just about the music, with minor emphasis on the business part of things. It was all about having everything be conducive to creativity. Bands would come in, they would have one song written for a 10-song album, and they would actually be in the studio creating, working together. As a musician, you know that you can riff or develop a new train of thought musically based on the person sitting next to you playing another instrument. Right. You can be inspired, you can be enthused by that or what have you. So the facility is just another instrument, like the room, for instance. There's a room sound, there's a room vibe or whatever, and if you get a bunch of people and they're in a room and they're all playing together, you're going to create something that's greater than the whole of those individuals. And in my opinion, a lot of that is missing today because the vast majority of albums are done piecemeal, with the bass player sending the files to the guitar player, sending the files to this person. And while they might be, perfectly correct, there's a sense of feeling, a sense of emotion, a sense of camaraderie and collaboration that doesn't exist when you put something together like that.
Well, interesting. Talk about that for a second, because years ago the band was in the room. Mm-hmm. Everybody was in the room and everybody was working together. And like I said, there was that synergy, that communication going on. It's not like that now. So just talk about what it was like and what you witnessed.
Well, I wouldn't say that it's not like that now. Not as a rule. Okay. It still exists. It still happens. There are still certain styles of band that lend themselves to that. A jazz quartet or something like that. Obviously, that's really the only way to go. Classical setting, it's the only way to go, or whatever. Rock bands, not so much, but and then the urban stuff. So it really just depends on the style and genre. So I wanted to, it's not completely dead or completely gone, but that's not the prototypical production flow, if you will, of how albums are made currently. And that's assuming somebody makes an album. It might be one song and then 6 months later another song. But.
And do you see albums being produced? Do you see much of that, or do you see more of the one song wonder?
No, it's way more of the, not one song wonder, but it's way more of a smaller production component in terms of 2 songs, 3 songs, something like that, which is really difficult and leads to something else. I was on a conference call with a bunch of label executives about the possibility of their albums being leaked and so on and so forth. And there was one individual that seemed to be very proud that their album, had experienced no leaks or, any kind of stuff like that. And I said, well, excuse me, respectfully, how many producers were on your album? And it was like, well, we had 1 producer. How many studios did you? Well, we used 2 studios. And I was like, okay, well, if you look at the Latin Grammy Awards, an album comes out for Best Engineer, there's 19 people on there. And of those 19 people as Best Engineer, half of them are musicians. It's a matter of, you have files going from place to place, players from place to place, whatever. And it's just going to statistically increase the likelihood that somebody leaves the CD in their car, or somebody plays something for a friend, or something gets leaked, just by the sheer volume of people that are involved in the modern production process.
Boy, interesting. Talk about the Latin scene that you've seen down here as it's developed. Was it like that many years ago, or has it grown tremendously?
In my opinion, it's grown tremendously in the sense, or specifically the catalyst is streaming revenue. It used to be that, if you were working on a Latin project, it's X number of dollars, and that's probably 50% of what an Anglo project was in terms of budget. Now, with the democratization of the recording, techniques, people can make records for very, very little money and with very little resources or whatever, which doesn't say that it's any better or any worse, but you listen to the radio and you tell me.
It's changed.
Yeah, it's changed. So the streaming revenue really was a tremendous impetus in terms of the Latin music. Basically, a wider appreciation, a wider range of consumption for a language that's not your first language and musical. One of the things that was the tipping point in my mind is, Ricky Martin, gyrating pelvis on the Grammys, and then for the vast majority of America, wow, there's people singing in another language. It just kind of dawned on them, but people have been doing that for 1,000 years, So, and in South Florida, we're painfully aware of that, but we're pleased that there's now some recognition of the people that are making music and have been making music time immemorial, but it just happens to be sung in Spanish or French or Italian or German or Chinese or what have you. So it's changed a lot in terms of with having more financial resources to do things. But I also think one thing that's interesting and this is my opinion, it seems to bear out, that in the Latin production world, I mean, at one point, South Florida had the highest proliferation of Pro Tools sales anywhere in the world. And that was largely because they were being shipped to South America, and, it was kind of a cultural hub for a bunch of different companies. But the methodology of the Latin record labels was, we're going to give you a finite amount of money to produce an album, and let us know when the album's done. Don't come back and tell us you need more money or whatever. So they were basically able to provide an all-in budget, and that became the norm. While it was lower than normal, all these producers and music makers would then take the first check and buy a Pro Tools system and then go to their house and then make records or whatever, so that all subsequent records were basically higher in profit because they just bought gear with the first check. Incredible. And now they're making records at home, and the less they spend, the more they make.
Incredible how it's changed.
Yeah.
Talk about that in the early days, about how a record label would come in and kind of direct you on what they wanted, and they'd give you some money and they'd say, let it run, and where it was then as compared to where it is now.
One of the things that comes to mind is the phrase, the term, the definition, producer. meant something completely different 50 years ago than it does today.
Interesting, yeah.
Depending upon the genre. I mean, 50 years ago, Tom Dowd, producer, means a whole slew of things. Whereas if you have a producer today who's making a reggaeton record or a hip hop record or whatever, may just be the guy that made the beat. Not the guy that went and picked a drunken rock superstar out of a strip club and had to drag him back to the studio because he needed to do his vocals. It's a whole plethora of skill sets that aren't necessarily apparent in modern production techniques.
How amazing to see it change to that degree and where it is now. So now recordings can be done really just anywhere.
Oh, yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, but Williams Sonoma sells knives, but that doesn't mean you're going to do brain surgery at home.
Right.
But bad music, nobody dies.
Yeah.
So, there's the analogy. But, yeah, you can make it anywhere. I have a client that we've been working with him for decades, and now he just doesn't want to spend money on a studio. He's like, if I'm going to write with, let's say, a top-line writer or whatever, and we fly him into town or whatever, why am I going to get him a fancy hotel and a fancy studio, and then have all these costs to go in to write with them or whatever? Put him in his fancy hotel, rent some speakers, a microphone or whatever, and then I'm going to go to the hotel, and we're going to work there, and and then that's it. And I don't have to pay for a studio.
Yeah.
Another example that speaks to that is I was talking to a producer, and a producer said that he hates when there's 50 people in the control room or what have you, because anything that they're playing or whatever, if somebody hears it or whatever, down the road somebody stands up and says, "Oh yeah, I co-wrote that, or I did that, or I contributed to the production, or I did that," and then there's lawsuits there, and it's like, you know what? If you weren't here, you can't be involved in it. You can't say you wrote it. So that's why he prefers to have very few people involved.
Interesting, very interesting.
So the money aspect of everything has changed dramatically. People's awareness of the money, of publishing, of mechanical rights and things like that. You didn't have musicians that knew anything about that 50 years ago. It was, we're going to come in and wow, I get 2 snare drums. That's and that was about the music. It wasn't about favored nations. It wasn't about any of these other things. It was about the music.
Yeah.
And I don't see that that's the overriding sentiment these days.
Interesting. So tell me about the business skills that you've had to learn to run this operation. I mean, there's a whole nother level of disciplines and a skill base that maybe you didn't know you had to develop those, or you had those skills that you had to really kind of fine tune them.
Because I've been doing this for a long time, a lot of the skill set just kind of happened. It wasn't a conscious, oh, well, gee, I don't know how to work this software program, or I don't know how to deal with this thing, or what have you. It just kind of happened. You deal with it, you move on. How do you get creative when there's no money left in the budget and the album's not done?
Yeah.
How do you explain to a record label that somebody just dumped a jug of, whatever into the console and it's going to cost them $10,000 to fix the console? Yeah. How do you, tell one person who wants the same room that somebody else wants that it's not available, and no, it's not because they're more important than you are, it's, psychological components, crazy requests for things legal and otherwise, a phone call at 4 o'clock in the morning saying, Jimmy Page thinks the room is too dead, so we pulled all the carpet out. I hope that's okay. Literal message on my answering machine, 20 years ago. So, there's a wide range of skills that sometimes can't be taught. You have to do it. One of the things that I like to tell when I'm hiring, general assistants or interns or whatever is, you graduated from school, that's great. Now your education starts. So the school is not to teach you everything you know. The school is to prepare you to learn everything you know.
Good, yeah, great.
So that's, and you're going to get out of it what you put into it. I've hired hundreds of people from all these different schools or whatever, and I've had geniuses and idiots from all of them. Yeah. So because you go to a school that costs X amount of dollars or has a reputation or whatever, doesn't mean that you're going to, come out with a better education. It's largely dependent upon the individual.
So what do you see from some of these kids that come out of the schools? Is there a enthusiasm? Is there a willingness to learn? Is there a challenge that they're not really prepared?
I can't lump it all into one classification because there are outliers, exceptions to all the rules. But no, I don't see it. One of the things before, in terms of recording studios and getting into the business and as an engineer or producer or whatever, was that there were very few schools. There was virtually nothing to teach you or whatever. So you had to really want it.
Right.
You had to come sit in the parking lot for 12 hours till somebody, either threw you out or said, okay, come on, I'll give you an interview or whatever.
Yeah.
You had to work days and nights and crazy hours, and there are labor laws and things now that may have always been in place, but they weren't highlighted before. But you have to have very real human resource concerns and stuff now, and it used to be just come in and work as long and as hard as you can, and you've got to want it, and you're gonna succeed, and there's no option for failure, and this is what you're called to do. And I don't see that prevailing sentiment exists in the vast majority of the applicants that we get at this point for entry-level positions.
Where do you see the recording industry in 10, 15, 20 years?
To go back to the other thing, the recording industry, the gravy years were, 75 to 92, let's say, or what, something like that.
Yeah.
I had a kid that wanted to get into music. Call me and say, hey, I'm thinking about going to this school or that school, or what would you give me as advice, and what direction should I take? And mostly seriously, but mostly sarcastically, I said to him, I got, 2 words for you: study dentistry. And he laughed and whatever and went on his thing. And 7 years later, guy pulls up in a big brand new, Mercedes, and wants to book studio time. We talking, and you don't remember me, do you? And I was like, no, sorry, I don't. And he was like, well, you were speaking at Full Sail or whatever, and I asked you, and you told me study dentistry. And I was like, oh yeah. He said, well, so I did. He said, I got a degree in dentistry, and now I can afford to make music my hobby and not have to make it to pay my bills. So I can do what I do, and I can still, be in the music industry and do whatever on my own terms. And I was like, well, that's great. I don't want to prevent anybody from being in the music industry, but you have to realize that it's music business now, and it's a different thing than it used to be.
Do you see the passion as evident now as maybe it was years ago, or has it stayed consistent?
No, I don't. I think the passion has declined definitively, in my opinion, which is okay in the sense that it makes it easier to pick out the people that have it. When they show up and want a job.
Interesting.
Everybody shows up and wants a job and says, here's my resume, and I went to this school, and then every resume that comes from that school looks the same or what have you. But when they sit there are certain psychological elements, certain common sense, intellectual considerations that I have to give for a potential employee or whatever that have nothing to do with the sheet of paper. And you've got 15 minutes, 30 minutes or whatever to make that come through, because all these schools generate hundreds and hundreds of graduates, and there's 5 jobs. There's a faster career path about, you go on the road with somebody and you hang out and you're their guy or whatever, but that doesn't mean that you're a quality audio engineer that's going to be able to track, Bocelli one day, Dr. Dre the next day, and Mariah Carey the next day, It just means that you can push spacebar and go on the road with somebody. There are different paths to the same goal, but it's a matter of how bad people want it, and because it doesn't just come to you. You've got to put in the time.
Absolutely. Well, the magic of this room alone, just as we look at the beauty of this room, it's just a beautiful room. Hotel California, Heaven and Hell, Margaritaville, Saturday Night Fever. So many great songs came from this room that have changed generations and cultures and are still very, very predominant in the music scene today. It's amazing what has come from the core of what has come from these walls. What do you see with just creativity and talent of people coming in? Is there still going to be an energy like that we witnessed in this room? Will it still be happening in the next several years?
Well, I think it'll still be happening. I don't know how common it will be, because I think that when you're a musician and you're compelled to be creative, you're compelled to express what's inside you of a musical nature, of a lyrical nature, or what have you. You're obsessed with your instrument. You're started at 4 and I carried, a guitar around with, all those kind of stories or whatever. It's, and I extrapolate this to hiring, entry-level people, assistants and things like that. You want somebody that has to do it. It's not a choice. It's, it's what I have to do, and I'm embracing it and I'm excelling at it or what have you. The same thing applies for engineering and everything else. So if you've got, there will be people that will have to be in bands, that will have to play instruments, that will thrive and live on playing with somebody next to you and stuff like that. So I think that's always going to happen. There will always be people creating music. And now there's, we're more exposed to genius than ever, but it comes from a lot of different directions, a lot of different music, a lot of different, production styles or what have you. So Tom Dowd once told me there are 3 things that make a hit record: the song, and the song. So there you go. I mean, yeah, it can be, the greatest song ever. So what if it sounds like crap? It's still the greatest song ever. And memory is the tied closest, with the exception of smell, to music. So virtually everybody has a musical milestone or moment in their life that, oh, I heard that song. Oh, I was going out with what's her name in the 3rd grade. Whatever.
Absolutely.
Everybody has that. So it's a very profound thing, and people don't necessarily have a choice. So yeah, that'll always happen, in my opinion. Now, whether they come to facilities like ours and value the acoustic properties, the staff, the technology, or whatever, that's another story. But we're here. So
the emotional connection that has spawned from this room and here at Criteria, the entire studio, all the different rooms. It's amazing how that emotional content is still vibrant in everyone when they hear these songs. It really is a very, very deep connection that people have.
Oh, absolutely. And and not just those songs. I mean, we're by the other side of the wall. There's something that'll be on the top 10 tomorrow, I'm sure. So, but it's all styles of music, and that's what gets me. I mean, from Bocelli recording in one room to Black Sabbath to whatever in another room, and we just do so many varieties of music. And that's one of the things that I try and tell people when we're hiring assistants or entry-level people is, look, here you're going to get the widest exposure possible to all of these different types of genres.
Yeah.
And if you want to call yourself a producer and you want to call yourself an engineer, you're best served being exposed to as many musical styles, possibilities, and production techniques as possible. And you're not going to get that if you're working at a publishing company or you're working at a a little jingle studio or something like that. Not that there's very many of those left, because the whole advertising thing is
has changed dramatically.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's funny too, because the intensity of this kind of a working of this creativity, this box of creativity that's come from here has spawned so many great songs and people and stories. It's almost like there's a documentary that's got to be made here at some point to kind of capture some of these stories.
It will be.
That's great to know. It really is great to know. We have all these younger generations that watch these interviews. So Trevor, in closing, what would you say to this next generation? They're watching this and they're thinking, maybe I might want to go into managing or producing or engineering. What would you say to this next generation to give them some advice?
Unlike other professions, you're going to be a doctor. Okay, you go to school, you can do this, you do this. There's a set path. There's a set 6 years. You do your internship, you do this. It doesn't exist here. In order to kind of know the best path to achieve where you're going, you need to know where you're going. So you kind of have an idea. Well, what is it you want to do? Not, I'm just going to get in the music industry because there's a million jobs in the music industry, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So you kind of have to have an idea of what you want to do, and then there's no concrete path. You do this, and then you do this or whatever. You almost have to make it up as you go, but you have to take advantage of the opportunities during the lifetime of the opportunity. So if you have to get an entry-level job, and pay your dues and work and be exposed to horrific things or whatever, that's just going to make you a better producer, engineer, whatever your career path is. And there's no one path that's right or wrong. The better you're going to end up being, it is directly proportionate to the amount of hard work and sacrifice you make. I mean, everybody wants to make $1 zillion. Everybody wants to have friends and go out on the weekends or whatever, but the two are mutually exclusive. You need to be in the studio. You need to be working on your craft. You need to be practicing your drums. You need to be refining what it is you do in order to be a success at it. And if you're not willing to take the hard and difficult and long path, then you're not going to achieve the upper tier of results.
Boy, great advice. Boy, I guess fate spoke when you were a young kid to plant you here, to guide you along the way and have this path open up for you. Fate spoke loud and clear for you.
I don't know. I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. But I've got great stories for cocktail parties. What can I tell you?
Oh, you've done great. Trevor, thank you so much on behalf of the Sessions. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Dom Famularo here, the Sessions panel. This is so exciting. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Click the subscribe button to be a part of what we're doing. The views help us tremendously. All of your comments, we read them and react to them. This is incredible. The support you're giving us is great. The Sessions panel. We'll see you real soon.